Hey there. As the first rays of sunlight spill over the ancient city of Uruk, you find yourself standing amid the slow unfolding of something quietly monumental, a moment that will soon echo through centuries, yet feels gentle and almost unnoticed at its beginning. Tonight, in the hush before dreams, you'll witness a single scribe's humble scratches on clay spark, a wave that will change how humanity remembers, commands, and connects. By the time you reach the end, you might be surprised to discover just how much power was hidden in a basket of clay tokens and a single, careful hand. If you enjoy drifting through lost worlds and unraveling the secrets of ancient minds, you're welcome to stay, like, and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this kind of journey. Wherever you are, whether it's midnight in Cairo or dawn in Sao Paulo, go ahead and tell us where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's turn this into a global bedtime gathering. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let yourself sink into the warm, drowsy hum of Uruk as history quietly rewrites itself around you. Uruk, 3,200 years before the Common Era, is not just a city. It's a living maze of dusty alleys, sun-baked bricks, and the constant shuffle of feet. The air is thick with the aroma of fresh bread and clay dust, mingling with the distant calls of market vendors. You step carefully around a puddle left by yesterday's rain, hearing the soft thud of baskets landing on stone as merchants prepare for the day. In the center of this organized chaos, your attention is drawn to a figure kneeling beside a basket of wet clay tablets. A scribe, his hair already dusted with the fine powder of his trade, dips a reed stylus into the soft surface, etching tiny symbols with the practiced ease of someone who knows he's doing something important, even if no one else quite realizes it yet. Around you, the city is alive. Carts creak by, pulled by donkeys whose hooves leave shallow imprints in the mud. The chatter of buyers and sellers rises and falls, punctuated by the clang of metal and the distant bark of a dog. But here, beside this scribe, a quieter world exists. You hear the subtle scratch of stylus against clay, almost lost amid the noise. It's a sound that means little to most people passing by, but for those who pay attention, it marks the beginning of a new era. The scribe glances up, eyes sharp and a little wary, as if he knows that people might one day look back at this moment and wonder how it all began. You crouch beside him, feeling the cool, gritty texture of the clay tablet beneath your fingertips. The scribe offers you a half smile, then gestures to a small collection of tokens, little lumps of fired clay, each shaped and marked with a unique design. These, he seems to say without words, are the original building blocks of memory. Long before anyone thought to write on tablets, these tokens kept track of sheep, jars of oil, or bushels of grain. Each one is a promise, a record, really, that someone delivered what they said they would. It's a three-dimensional accounting system, tangible and direct, but as the city grows more complicated, even this system is starting to fall behind. You watch as the scribe presses a token into the clay, leaving a neat impression, then scribes a symbol next to it with his stylus. It's oddly familiar, like watching someone invent the first emoji. One symbol for a sheep, another for a sack of grain. The scribe's hands move quickly, but each mark is deliberate, transforming physical tokens into a visual language that anyone with the right training can decode. The scribe's neighbor, an older merchant, leans over and grumbles that in his day you had to count every sheep by hand, not just trust a handful of marks. The scribe just shrugs, as if to say, times change. As you lean in, the scent of damp earth and baked bread fills your nose. The city's hum recedes into the background. Here, in this quiet moment, you realize you're witnessing the birth of writing. A tool so powerful, it will reshape cities, temples, and even the minds of kings. It's not just about keeping track of goods anymore. It's about keeping track of promises, debts, and stories. The scribe's stylus is as sharp as any blade, carving memory into clay for generations yet unborn. Suddenly, a young apprentice rushes over, clutching a basket overflowing with tokens. He nearly trips, scattering a few onto the ground. The scribe sighs, stoops to help, and you catch the briefest glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Even in the world's first bureaucracy, paperwork, or in this case claywork, finds a way to pile up. The apprentice recovers, cheeks flushed, and the scribe resumes his steady work. For a moment, you can almost hear the laughter of future office workers, complaining about paperwork mountains of their own. You notice that the scribe isn't alone. Behind him, a pair of children sneak glances at the unfamiliar marks, giggling as they try to copy the shapes with sticks in a patch of mud. Their mother calls them away, but not before one manages to draw a wobbly spiral that looks suspiciously like a sheep, or maybe a loaf of bread. In that moment, you glimpse how writing, once the domain of specialists, will eventually find its way into every corner of human life. A gentle breeze stirs the dust and carries the distant sound of temple bells. You look up and spot the ziggurat, its steps rising above the rooftops like a staircase to the sky. Somewhere inside, priests and scribes are already using the new script to record offerings, prayers, and the names of kings. The written word is quickly becoming the backbone of power and memory. In a city like Uruk, where stories and grain flow in equal measure, the ability to capture both is a kind of magic. You realize that many early civilizations, whether in the river valleys of Egypt or the forests of the Americas, will recognize this magic and harness it. As the sun climbs higher, you wander through the market square. The scribe's work fades into the bustle, but its impact lingers. Every tablet, every mark, is a thread in a vast tapestry stretching across time. From this quiet revolution, kings will issue decrees, merchants will settle debts, and poets will capture the dreams of their people. You feel the weight and promise of these first written words pressing softly against your skin, as if the clay itself is whispering secrets. Then, just as you start to lose yourself in the ordinary rhythm of the city, a stranger approaches. He speaks of distant lands, where the sun rises over pyramids instead of ziggurats, and where the gods themselves are believed to have given writing to humanity. He tells you of Itzamna, a Maya deity from far across the ocean, credited with teaching people the art of writing. The story seems impossible. How could such an idea travel so far, to civilizations that have never met? Yet even here, in the heart of Mesopotamia, you sense the universality of this newfound power. A sudden gust of wind rattles a stack of tablets, sending a few tumbling into the dust. The scribe tuts. but you help him gather them up. As you do, you notice the subtle variations. Some marks are crisp and angular, others gently curving. It occurs to you that, just as languages will diverge and evolve, so too will the way people choose to write. Each civilization will leave its own imprint, shaped by the tools they use and the stories they need to tell. In this moment, you see not just the birth of writing, but the beginning of 1,000 journeys, each one inscribed in its own way. When you step back from the scribe's side, you realize that the city itself is changing. What began as a simple act of keeping count has become a force that will outlive empires. The scratch of stylus on clay, the scent of dust and bread, the laughter of children tracing their first marks, all of it converges into a single, powerful current. You have witnessed the start of something that will flow through pyramids, temples, and palaces, shaping the world in ways no one here can yet imagine. Now, drift further back, perhaps thousands of years, into a dim cave at the edge of a forest, where the only light comes from flickering torches. A damp stone cave, twilight of the late Neolithic, one solitary figure kneeling by a fire, others hunched nearby, the air thick with smoke and the scent of moss. You crouch close to the fire, feeling the uneven cave floor beneath your knees. Orange torchlight dances across the walls, revealing the hand of a hunter as he draws a line along a bleached animal bone. His fingers are careful, pressing the sharp stone tool over and over, forming a series of notches. Each mark is deliberate, almost meditative. You can hear the soft rhythmic tapping, like the ticking of a primitive clock, measuring something precious and fleeting. The others watch him, their eyes reflecting the flickering light, as if the act itself is a kind of magic. This is not writing in the way you know it. There are no letters, no words, not yet. These marks are memory's first lifelines, tallies for the days since the last hunt, or perhaps the number of times the river has flooded. The hunter pauses, brow furrowed, then adds another notch, one more story remembered, one more detail fixed in bone. A few paces away, another figure crouches near the cave wall. She dips her fingers in a mixture of crushed ochre and animal fat. A swirl appears on the stone, then a handprint, then a series of dots. The air is cool against your skin, but the wall beneath her palm feels warm. Each new symbol joins a patchwork of images, herds of bison, curling spirals, stick figures with outstretched arms. The cave echoes with the scratch of stone against stone, the hush of paint against rock. These are not sentences, but reminders, the passing of a season, the bounty of a hunt, a tally of debts owed or favors given. You are surrounded by a living archive, but it is fragile. The memory of the group is the true library, and these marks serve only to help it stretch a bit further. If the cave is abandoned, if the bone is lost, the knowledge fades. You realize that every mark depends on someone who remembers what it means. It is a system full of gaps and silences, a world where forgetting is always one storm away. A spark leaps from the fire, briefly illuminating a new set of marks on the wall. They are different, finer, more deliberate, a sequence of vertical strokes. You trace them with your eyes, wondering if they mean 3 animals caught, or perhaps 3 winters survived. The meaning is slippery, changing with each storyteller. Here, The power of memory reigns, and the marks are its loyal but imperfect servants. As you breathe in, the air is thick with the scent of wet earth and burnt wood. The only sound is the occasional drip of water from the cave ceiling, the quiet shuffle of feet, and the ever-present scratch of tools. The world outside is wild, unpredictable, but within these stone walls, humanity is trying to make sense of it all. One tally, one symbol at a time. Now, as the fire dims, you notice something. The urge to record is everywhere. You spot a piece of bark with a crude spiral, a cluster of pebbles arranged in a careful pattern, even a knot tied in a strip of rawhide. Each is a memory prompt, a way to keep track when words alone will not do. There is a comfort in these objects, a sense that the past can be held in the palm of your hand, even if only for a moment. Then, a new sound, laughter. One of the elders jokes that if anyone forgets whose turn it is to fetch water, they can always count the notches on the stick, unless the stick goes missing, in which case everyone is conveniently off the hook. The others chuckle, the sound rolling through the cave like distant thunder. Even in this early age, you recognize the gentle humor that comes from shared struggle and shared memory. For a moment, you close your eyes and listen. The cave is alive with the quiet efforts of record-keeping. There is no alphabet, no grammar, but there is order and intention. It is a world of lists and reminders, of debts and promises, carried in bones and stones, and the stories that accompany them. You realize that all of this is laying the groundwork for something bigger, a leap from memory aids to true writing. Time seems to slow as you run your fingers along the cool, rough stone. You feel the grooves carved long ago, the residue of ochre, the faint warmth where someone pressed a hand. These are the echoes of ancient intentions, the first attempts to fix ideas in time and space. You can almost sense the anticipation of what comes next, as if the walls themselves are waiting for a new kind of mark. Suddenly, a gust of wind sweeps through the cave, making the torches flicker wildly. Shadows leap and twist, and for a brief, dizzying moment, you feel the weight of thousands of years pressing in. The urge to record, to remember, to be remembered. It is not just a trick of survival. It is a longing for permanence, a hope that the world will know you were here. You open your eyes, and the cave fades away. In its place, you sense the stirrings of ancient cities, places where the urge to record will soon become a revolution. Already, in distant lands, people are gathering in bustling villages and river valleys, trading not just goods, but stories and marks. The seeds of writing are scattered across the world, waiting to take root. In the Americas, the Maya will one day tell stories of the god Itzamna, who gifted writing to humanity, a divine act that turned memory into something eternal. Far to the east, in China, legends will speak of a sage named Kangji, who brings the first characters to life and forever changes how people remember their past. Across continents, the idea of writing seems to spark independently, as if humanity everywhere is reaching for the same solution, each in its own way. Here is what has changed. From simple marks and memory aids, the world is on the cusp of inventing true writing. The difference is profound. With writing, words and ideas can be fixed in time and space, no longer tied to a single storyteller or a single cave. Knowledge can be passed from one generation to the next, even if no one remembers the original event. Power itself will shift as those who can write begin to shape laws, histories, and empires. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. The scratch of stylus on stone, the texture of clay beneath careful hands, the distant hum of ancient cities. These are the sounds and sensations of a world about to change forever. The memory of the hunter's notched bone lingers in your mind, a fragile bridge between the old ways and the new. You listen, and in the hush between heartbeats, you hear the first whispers of writing. They promise something extraordinary. A way to remember, a way to be remembered, and a way to shape the world beyond your own lifetime. Soon, you will step into the sunlit storerooms of Mesopotamia, where the invention of writing will turn tallies and symbols into the very foundation of civilization. Or in other regions across the world. Mesopotamia, late afternoon, a merchant and a scribe in a storeroom stacked with barley and oil jars. You kneel on a woven mat, sunlight filtering through a small window and warming your back as you watch the merchant at work. His hands, stained with dust and a sheen of sweat, move with the precision of someone who has counted more barley than most people have ever seen. He lines up the tiny clay tokens, a cone for a jar of oil, a sphere for a basket of barley, a cylinder for a goat. Each one is a miniature contract, a promise you can touch. The air smells of earth and grain, and somewhere behind you, a donkey brays, a timeless soundtrack for business in the Bronze Age. The merchant scoops the tokens into a lump of wet clay. With practiced fingers, he shapes the clay into a ball, smoothing it over and sealing the tokens inside. He presses his own seal, a simple geometric pattern, into the soft surface. You see how this little lump is more than a bundle of goods. It is a locked record, a message for the future, one that needs no memory to keep it straight. If anyone disputes the count, all they have to do is break open the envelope and check the shapes inside. It is a system as tangible as your own hands, and in some ways, it is oddly familiar. You might even think of it as the world's first password, protected file, though the interface is a bit more breakable. This is accounting before writing, but already you sense the leap from spoken promises to physical proof. Each clay token, whether cone, sphere, or cylinder, stands for a specific quantity, a neat solution to the age-old problem of who owes what to whom. No more arguments over faded memories or missing sheep. Now, when a tax collector comes calling, the numbers are baked right into the clay, as unchangeable as a saved file on a very patient hard drive. You realize that these tokens are not just objects. They are ideas made solid, a kind of thinking you can hold in your palm. A scribe enters, reed stylus tucked behind his ear. He squats beside you, squinting at the sealed clay ball. Without a word, he rolls a fresh tablet from a lump of clay. You watch him pull the stylus free and press it into the surface, leaving crisp, wedge-shaped marks in neat rows. The stylus clicks softly with each impression, the sound like rain tapping on a roof. Here is the next step. The tokens become symbols, and the symbols become writing. The scribe glances at the merchant, who recites the goods being shipped: barley, oil, and 2 goats. The scribe records each item, his hand steady, his marks deliberate. The smell of wet clay mingles with the musty scent of old grain, and you realize that you are witnessing the birth of writing, one wedge at a time. You might wonder why this all feels so urgent. In a world where memory can fail, and promises can slip away with the setting sun, these tokens and tablets are power. They are trust, made official. They are also a new kind of tool, one that does not wear out with age. In a few centuries, cities like Shurapak and Lagash will fill their archives with tens of thousands of clay tablets. These will record not only the shipments of barley and oil, but also labor assignments and tax collections, an entire city's worth of obligations and ambitions pressed into clay for safekeeping. But here is a twist. Not all early writing leaves such sturdy traces. As you look around, you imagine the same moment playing out in Egypt, or along the banks of the Yellow River, or in other regions across the world. There, scribes might jot records on wood, leather, or strips of cloth, materials that vanish in the damp or crumble to dust long before anyone can preserve them. The clay tablets of Mesopotamia survive because clay does not mind a bit of fire or flood. But in other places, the first words may have faded long ago, lost to the elements. This means that the very earliest stories are, in a sense, hidden from you. The first preserved texts are not necessarily the first texts ever written. They are simply the survivors, the lucky few who dodged the ravages of time. It is as if you opened a filing cabinet from 5,000 years ago and found only the records that happened to be printed on stone rather than on paper. The rest, no matter how important, are gone. Pause for a moment and listen. The storeroom buzzes with activity. You hear the scrape of baskets on the floor, the muffled voices of merchants haggling in the street, and the soft thud as another clay envelope is pressed shut. The air vibrates with purpose. Here, writing is not poetry or story yet. It is transaction and tally, the heartbeat of a civilization learning to remember itself. Now, take a slow breath and let your mind drift to the present. Imagine your favorite spreadsheet, the neat columns and tidy rows. Think of a world where every formula is a clay token, every sum a stylus mark. The stakes are the same, keeping track of who has what and who owes what to whom. Only now, the tokens fit in your pocket, and sometimes in your cloud storage. You have witnessed the first steps of writing, born from the needs of traders and tax collectors. The world will never be the same. With every clay impression, people unlock a new kind of memory, one that outlives its makers, one that can be checked, challenged, and trusted. You can almost feel the weight of history shift as the scribe smooths his clay tablet and sets it in the sun to dry. Outside, the city of Uruk is busier than ever, ready for the next leap in the story of writing. Uruk, Suma, late afternoon. The air is thick with the scent of wet clay and the distant hum of voices. You crouch beside a scribe named Dumuzi, his knees dusted with earth, as he readies a fresh tablet on his lap. Around you, the city surges with energy. a tangle of merchants, farmers, and temple workers, all weaving through narrow streets lined with mud brick walls. Somewhere a goat protests. But here, in the shade of a low wall, time slows. Dumuzi dips a blunt reed stylus into his palm and presses the tip into the cool, pliable surface. Each motion is practiced and deliberate, yet there is a quickness to his hands, like a chef dicing onions for the 100th time. The stylus carves small, wedge-shaped marks, one after another, in tidy rows. The sound is gentle, a faint rhythmic tap, 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 like rain on a roof. You lean closer, watching the marks multiply. Gone are the days when a handful of clay tokens shaped like sheep, jars, or loaves told the whole story. Now, the story fits right here, in a single palm-sized slab. These marks are cuneiform, the writing system born in Sumer over 5,000 years ago. Scholars generally agree that true writing first appeared in this very region, around 3200 to 3100 BCE. Picture that for a moment. The world is still mostly wild, forests and rivers stretching farther than any king could dream. And yet here, people have managed to press language itself into clay. You sense the weight of that realization as Dumuzi glances up at you, a sly smile flickering across his face. It is as if he knows he is part of something that will outlast every market day and every ruler's reign. Dumuzi's tablet is not a work of art, at least not in the way a painted vase or a carved statue might be. Yet, in these abstract shapes he captures names, numbers, and even the simplest of sentences. The lines and wedges are far removed from the old picture signs. They no longer look like sheep or jars. Instead, they stand for sounds, ideas, and syllables, tiny containers for meaning. You watch as he records a shipment of barley, using the series of marks that only the trained eye can decipher. If you squint, you might even see a faint resemblance to modern spreadsheets, but without the digital blare or looming deadlines. The clay tablet is the original hard drive, and Dumuzi is the system administrator of his age. All around Uruk, scribes like Dumuzi are hard at work. They fill temple archives with records of offerings, write up legal contracts, and set down royal decrees in careful rows. These scribes are the keepers of memory, their tablets stacked in dark rooms where the air smells of earth and old secrets. The power of the written word is not lost on anyone. In fact, the people here whisper that writing is a kind of magic, a way to bind promises, remember debts, and even speak to the gods when voices fail. You feel a chill as a breeze stirs the dust, and Dumuzi's stylus pauses for a moment. It is as if the very act of writing has summoned something larger than the city itself. The sun slips lower, casting long shadows across the square. You stand and stretch, feeling the slight ache in your knees. Around you, the sounds of Uruk continue. A donkey brays, children laugh, and somewhere a potter's wheel hums. The city is alive, each person playing a part in the great experiment of civilization. Yet, in the quiet corner where Dumuzi works, you sense the pulse of something new, an idea that will ripple outward, changing everything it touches. Here is the twist in Sumer. Writing did not simply emerge out of practicality. It was not just a tool for counting sheep or tracking taxes. It was a leap into a new way of thinking about the world. With each wedge and stroke, people began to imagine information as something that could be stored, shared, and shaped. Writing became a force that could outlive memory and even outlast its creators. In that sense, every clay tablet is both a record and a promise, a stubborn little artifact that refuses to forget. The consequence is plain. Memory is no longer just a matter of telling stories around the fire. Now, it can be pressed into clay and tucked away in a dark, dry room. You realize that the written word is not only about remembering, but also about controlling what is remembered. Fast forward a little, but not too much. The city's heartbeat remains the same. You pass through the bustling market, the smell of roasted onions and fresh-baked bread lingering in the air. At the entrance to the temple, you watch as a high priest consults a stack of tablets, lips moving in silent calculation. The priest's robes brush the floor, trailing dust, as he reads aloud the names of donors and the amounts each has pledged. The crowd listens, caught between awe and anxiety. For the first time, there is a record that cannot be argued with, a silent witness to every promise and every debt. You can almost hear the collective sigh, half relief and half resignation. The balance of power has shifted. The knowledge once held in memory now lives in clay. As dusk settles, you follow Dumuzi to a small scribal school tucked behind the temple. The room is crowded with young students, their hands stained with ochre and clay. They practice making the same wedge marks over and over until their fingers ache. Each student dreams of joining the ranks of scribes, earning a place among the keepers of knowledge. You cannot help but smile as one boy, frustrated, wipes his hand on his tunic and mutters about wishing for a stylus that never blunts. If only he knew what would come in a few thousand years, a world of glowing screens and endless fonts. But here, the stakes are real. To write is to wield power. To read is to unlock secrets. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. An older scribe, his beard flecked with white, tells the students that writing did not simply spring from human invention. The gods themselves, he insists, entrusted writing to humanity. The names change from city to city. In Sumer, the god Enki is said to have whispered the first signs. In distant Maya lands, the deity Itzamna is credited with bringing writing to the people. You catch the glimmer of belief in the student's eyes. Writing is not just a craft, it is a gift from the divine. You step back, letting the chatter of the school fade into the evening. The city of Uruk glows under the first stars, its walls silent witnesses to millennia of change. Somewhere, a scribe finishes a tablet and sets it aside, the marks still soft and shining in the lamplight. There is a satisfying sense of completion, a story fixed in clay, waiting to be found again. Now, you find yourself under the brilliant sun of ancient Egypt, standing in the cool shadow of a temple wall. Ancient Egypt, midday. The Nile's breeze carries the scent of river mud and lotus. You stand with your back pressed to the temple's limestone, where the shadow is cool and a little damp. The wall in front of you is alive with color, blue, red, and gold, all shaped into precise figures. Nearby, a scribe named Menes, his linen crisp, his reed brush poised, leans over a block of stone. Each time Menes dips his brush into a tiny jar of black ink, he gives a little nod, as if to greet the ibis, the owl, or the spiral of rope he is about to paint. Behind him, priests shuffle in the half-light, their voices muffled by thick incense smoke. The air pulses with the low, steady chant of prayers. You almost expect the carved falcons and coiled cobras to twitch and blink. So sure is everyone here that these marks on stone are more than pictures. To the people of the Nile, each sign is a channel for the voices of gods and kings, writing as a living presence, not just a dusty record. You brush your fingers over the wall. The limestone feels warm and rough, but the painted symbols are slick, almost oily beneath your touch. Menes notices your interest and flashes a knowing smile, as if to say, "Yes, this is a kind of magic." In Egypt, writing is not only practical, it is sacred. The word for hieroglyphs means words of the gods. The priests believe that Thoth, the ibis-headed deity, invented writing and gifted it to humanity as a bridge between mortals and the divine. Take a moment to listen. The city beyond the temple wall is a living thing. Donkey carts rattle over sun-baked streets, children splash in muddy canals, and somewhere a copper bell tings as a baker slides flatbread from his oven. But here, inside these walls, the world hushes beneath the weight of meaning. Every symbol Menes paints has a purpose. A vulture stands for the letter A, a ripple of water for N. Some marks represent whole words: sun, king, eternity. Others are sounds, the building blocks of names and deeds. It is a system at once dazzling and daunting, as much art as language. Now, you might wonder, how did these intricate symbols come to cover the walls of Egypt's temples and tombs? You have heard that other civilizations, like the Sumerians of Mesopotamia or the scribes of early China, also invented ways to capture speech and memory in marks. In Mesopotamia, the earliest writers pressed wedge-shaped signs into clay tablets. In China, symbols danced across bamboo slips and bone. Far across the ocean, Mayan glyphs curled across stone and stucco. Each system is a unique answer to the same question: how do you make spoken words last? But in Egypt, writing is more than a tool for shopping lists or tax records. It is a performance, a display of power and faith. The pharaoh's name is carved so deeply on temple walls that it will outlast the wind and the sand. The Book of the Dead, painted in tight columns on papyrus scrolls, promises safe passage through the afterlife. Even a simple offering table bears prayers for bread, beer, and a long, healthy life. The scribe Menes straightens his back and gestures for you to follow. He leads you behind the temple, down a narrow passage where sunlight barely reaches. Here, apprentice scribes crouch on reed mats, hunched over scraps of limestone and broken pottery. Their lessons are repetitive and relentless. The master scribe dictates, "Write the name of the king." Again, you hear the scratch of reed against stone, a sound not unlike a pencil on paper, but sharper, more deliberate. The apprentices' faces are taut with concentration. Each mistake earns a gentle rebuke and another round of practice. Here is where you see the stakes. In Egypt, only a tiny fraction of people learn to write. Scribes are respected, envied, sometimes even feared. With each brushstroke, They shape the memory of the nation. They decide which stories are carved in stone and which are left to fade in the sand. Writing is not just about practicality. It is about information, control, and the promise of immortality. Suddenly, Menes snatches up a scrap of papyrus and hands it to you. He laughs softly and urges you to try. The reed brush feels awkward in your grip, the ink cold and slippery. You attempt a simple symbol, a sun disk maybe, or the upright feather of Malat. Your lines wobble and drip. Menes grins, his eyes twinkling. Even the gods took time to master this, he teases, and you feel a little less embarrassed. Take a breath. You are now part of a lineage that stretches back not just centuries, but millennia. Before temples and scrolls, prehistoric people painted animals on cave walls and scratched tally marks onto bones. These early marks are the ancestors of Menes hieroglyphs, the first tentative steps toward making memory visible and permanent. The lesson continues. The master scribe explains that not all writing survives. In Egypt, the dry sand preserves papyrus and painted tombs. But in other places, deep forests or damp riverbanks, early writing may have faded long ago, lost to rot and rain. Some cultures likely wrote on wood, leather, or woven cloth, materials as perishable as a summer breeze. That is why so much of what you know comes from what was carved in stone or pressed in clay. The rest is a mystery, hints and shadows at the edge of history. Menes gestures to a basket filled with reed pens and a stack of battered practice stones. He tells you, with mock solemnity, that in Egypt, a scribe's most valuable tool is patience. You sense that he is only half joking. The path to mastery is long, but each symbol you learn is a step closer to understanding the world as the ancients did, as a place where every word, once written, is a kind of magic. Outside, the city's noise swells, then recedes as you focus on the gentle rhythm of brush to stone. The air is thick with the smell of ink and the faint tang of sweat. You wonder if, thousands of years from now, anyone will ever read what you have written. The thought is both humbling and exhilarating. You step out once more into the sun. The temple wall gleams, covered with stories of gods, kings, and everyday people. The scene has changed. You have seen how writing in Egypt is both sacred and practical, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The palace of Lagash buzzes with purpose, promising a new chapter in the story of ancient writing. As if to say, yes, this is a kind of magic. The word for hieroglyphs means words of the gods. Prite. A vulture stands for the letter A, a ripple of water for N. Lagash, southern Mesopotamia, late afternoon. A scribe, anew in the palace records room. You slip off your sandals at the threshold and step into the cool hush of the palace archive. The air smells faintly of river mud and baked clay. In the dim light, you find yourself beside a scribe named Enlil. Idun. His reed stylus taps gently against a damp tablet. Each soft scratch seems to echo in the high-ceilinged chamber, joining a quiet chorus of scribes busy at their work. The room is lined with shelves, each crowded with squat, pillow-shaped tablets. They look almost edible, a collection of ancient brownies. But the only thing getting devoured here is information. You watch as Enlil-Idin presses wedge-shaped marks into the clay. Every stroke matters. Today he is recording labor assignments. Who will dig which canal? Who owes a basket of barley? Who is late with a goat? It is not glamorous work, but it is the backbone of the city. Without these careful lists, the king would have no idea where his workers are, or what resources flow into his storerooms. The palace's power depends on these records, and so, in a quiet way, does the order of the whole city. Through these tablets, the king's commands ripple out across the floodplains, reaching fields and workshops far beyond the palace walls. You imagine the alternative, a world where every field hand and fisherman delivers news by word of mouth. The confusion would be legendary. Instead, with writing, Lagash hums like a well-oiled machine. The scribe's marks are more than doodles. They are the city's nervous system, relaying signals from the palace brain to its distant limbs. And Lilidin glances up and gives a lopsided smile. He shows you a basket of clay tokens, each shaped like a tiny loaf, cone or sphere. These are the ancestors of the marks on his tablet. Each token stands for a quantity of goods, a jar of oil, a flock of sheep, a measure of grain. Before writing, people stored these tokens in clay envelopes. When they wanted to check the contents, they broke open the envelope. Eventually, someone, probably a tired accountant, realized it would be easier to press the shape of each token onto the outside. Just like that, symbols were born. You have to admire the Mesopotamian flair for efficiency. If only modern tax forms came with this much charm. Outside, the city of Lagash thrums with life. You hear distant shouts from the riverbank, where barges unload cargo. The scent of roasting onions drifts through an open window. Somewhere, a dog barks. Inside, the only sound is the steady scratch of stylus on clay. The rhythm is almost hypnotic, a lullaby for the administratively inclined. You realize that here, in this quiet room, history is being shaped, one wedge at a time. Enlil-Idin points to a shelf stacked with older tablets from Shuruppak and Lagash. These ancient records list workers' names, tax collections, and even debts. Some tablets are so worn, the marks have faded, but the stories linger. You run your fingers over one. The clay is cool. The indentations surprisingly deep. You think of the hands that pressed these marks, the worries and hopes they carried. Thousands of such tablets survive to this day, silent witnesses to the daily grind of Bronze Age life. Then a sudden concrete shift. A palace official bursts in, trailing the scent of sweat and fresh reeds. He drops a new order onto Enlil-Idin's desk. A shipment of copper must be sent upriver by dawn. The scribe sighs, rolls a fresh lump of clay, and begins again. The city's gears never stop turning. It's a reminder that in this world, writing is not just a luxury, it is survival. The consequence is clear. The king's authority is no longer limited by the reach of his voice. You pause for a breather as the scribe's stylus glides across the clay. The air is thick with quiet purpose. Here, every mark is a promise, every tablet a bridge between ruler and ruled. You consider how writing, once just a clever way to count sheep, now holds the city together. It is the glue of government. You step back, letting your gaze wander to the edges of the room. There, a basket of broken tablets sits, fragments of lost stories and forgotten bargains. For every record preserved, countless others have crumbled away, swept up by ancient janitors or dissolved in a flood. You wonder how much of Lagash's history is gone, how much of any civilization's memory disappears when its records fade. The stakes are huge. Only what is written endures. Across the room, a young apprentice is being scolded for smudging a tablet. The scribe's words are sharp, but the apprentice grins sheepishly. You have to smile. Some things, like rookie mistakes, never change. The apprentice wipes his hands and starts over, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth. As the afternoon light shifts, you notice a threadbare reed mat by the window. Enlil Idun invites you to sit. You settle in, letting the day's heat seep from your body. The walls are thick, sheltering you from the city's bustle. For a moment, you are simply present, a quiet observer in the engine room of an ancient world. You close your eyes and listen. The faint scratch of stylus, the distant clatter of carts, the low hum of voices. It is a symphony of order, each sound a layer in the city's memory. You open your eyes and realize you are part of a story bigger than any one person. A story written in clay, one careful line at a time. The scene shifts subtly as the sun lowers. The scribe's work continues, steady and unhurried. You sense the weight of the moment. These records will outlast their makers. The city's future depends on the clarity and care of each mark. It is a comforting thought, in a way, to know that memory can be molded, dried, and stacked for safekeeping. You rise, stretching your legs. The scribe nods, already lost in his next assignment. The room feels timeless, the air thick with the patience of centuries. You step out into the corridor, leaving behind the gentle music of stylus on clay. That is how, in the palace of Lagash, writing has quietly transformed the world. One mark at a time, the city's heart beats on clay. You can already sense the next chapter waiting as you slip toward the tablet house, the Ajuba, where the scribes of tomorrow are learning their craft. Ancient Sumer, mid-morning. You are in a crowded Ajuba, a tablet house, surrounded by the muffled chorus of young voices, each reciting a litany of signs to the rhythm of their own anxious breath. The air is thick with the scent of damp clay and warm oil, mingling with the sharper smell of sweat and nervously chewed reeds. Flickering lamplight dances over the walls, revealing rows of shelves stacked with soft, blank tablets, waiting for the press of a stylus. You sit at a low bench, your knees pressed uncomfortably close to your chest. In front of you, a smooth slab of clay rests on a wooden board. Your fingers, sore and stiff, hold a reed stylus, an object that feels both powerful and utterly unforgiving. The master scribe, a tall figure with a measured gait and a face as unreadable as the symbols he teaches, moves quietly among the students. Every so often, he stops to peer over a shoulder, offering a gentle tap on the knuckles if a sign is crooked or the wedge is too deep. This is not a place for daydreaming. The Ajuba is Sumer's launchpad for the ambitious. Here is where you earn your ticket to the world of knowledge and influence. Scribes are the silent architects of civilization, their tablets holding the secrets of taxes, trade, and tales of the gods. Every student here knows that mastering the stylus is not just about neat handwriting. It is about unlocking power, one wedge at a time. The first exercise is always the same. The sign list. You copy the same marks over and over until your wrist aches. Each line is a promise that you will someday move beyond these drills to record royal decrees or the price of barley. The work is demanding, but you can sense the pride that pulses through the room. For every scraped knuckle and smudged tablet, there is a moment of satisfaction. A symbol pressed perfectly, a line recited without hesitation. The older students, perched near the front, wear their ink-stained tunics like badges of honor. You catch one exchanging a sly grin with a friend, both enjoying a rare joke at the master's expense. Even the most serious scribe is not immune to a little mischief. As you press the stylus into the clay, the sound is unexpectedly soothing. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. The clay yields, then springs back, leaving a crisp impression. It is a far cry from scribbling with a pencil on paper. Each wedge-shaped mark has its own rules: angle, depth, direction. Some signs are pictorial, like a simple drawing of a fish or a mountain. Others are abstract, barely recognizable as anything at all. Over time, you learn that these marks are more than pictures. They are building blocks for language itself. By combining signs, you can write names, verbs, even whole sentences. This is the leap from recording objects to expressing thoughts. The scribe's craft is a delicate dance between memory and muscle. Early in the day, you practice the basic signs, repeating them until your mind goes numb. As noon approaches and the lamps gutter, the lessons shift. Now, the master scribe demonstrates how to use the stylus to create different types of marks. With a deft flick, he shows how to press a triangular wedge for a simple sound, or drag the stylus to connect two shapes. The class watches, wide-eyed, as a word emerges from the clay, as if conjured by magic. The abstraction of cuneiform is both baffling and beautiful. Symbols that once looked like little pictures now stand for sounds, syllables, and even ideas. For a moment, you pause, flexing your aching fingers. The quiet is broken by the scrape of a tablet being smoothed for reuse. You notice how the master's eyes linger on a particularly ornate tablet, its surface clouded with signs. This is no simple receipt or inventory. It is a story, or perhaps a hymn, something meant to last. You realize that every scribe, even the newest apprentice, is connected to a long chain of memory. The marks you make today could one day be read by someone far in the future, their meaning clear or utterly mysterious. Suddenly, a gust of laughter erupts from the far side of the room. One student, bored of practicing sign lists, has pressed a tiny, lopsided fish into the corner of his tablet, a silent rebellion. The master scribe raises an eyebrow, but his mouth twitches in amusement. It is a small reminder that even in the most serious of places, humor finds a way. The tension breaks. You glance around and realize everyone is smiling, even if just for a moment. The consequence is simple: a shared sense of belonging. The knowledge that the daily grind is bearable when you are not alone. Outside, the city of Ur is alive. You can hear the distant clang of metalworkers, the bray of donkeys, and the hum of voices rising and falling in the marketplace. The world beyond the tablet house is chaotic, unpredictable. But inside these walls, there is order, each sign in its place, each student on a path. The contrast is striking. Here, in this dusty, lamplit room, you are part of something much greater than yourself. The Eduba is not just a school. It is a factory of civilization, producing the scribes who will keep the wheels of empire turning. As the afternoon wears on, the exercises become more complex. You are tasked with copying the passage from a royal inscription. The words are dense, the meaning obscure. Still, you persist, guided by the steady hand of tradition. The stylus feels more familiar now, the marks less intimidating. You notice how the older students help one another, correcting a misplaced wedge here, offering a whispered tip there. The camaraderie is real, forged in the fires of shared struggle. The prestige of the scribe is not just about status, it is about mastery, about joining a lineage that stretches back centuries. At the end of the day, your hands are cramped, and your tunic is dusted with flecks of clay. You wipe your brow, savoring the cool air drifting in from the courtyard. The master scribe collects the tablets, stacking them with care. Some will be baked and preserved, others smoothed and reused. You linger, reluctant to leave the quiet order of the Eduba for the noise of the city. As you step outside, you realize you are walking a path that began with the first wedge pressed into soft earth. The invention of writing was not a single event, but a long, slow transformation, from pictures to symbols, from objects to ideas. You pause beneath the shadow of the ziggurat, feeling the pulse of ancient Mesopotamia all around you. The world is changing, and you are part of it. The texture of the clay still clings to your fingertips, a silent reminder of the day's work. Your journey as a scribe has just begun, but already you sense the weight and wonder of your craft. Every mark you make is a step toward memory, power, and the shaping of history. The evening breeze carries distant laughter, and the last rays of sun glint off the city's rooftops. You look back at the tablet house, its door swinging shut behind you, and wonder what stories your own hands will help preserve. The ancient world stretches before you, full of secrets waiting to be recorded. Now, as the city settles into dusk, your path leads onward to new places, new symbols, and new beginnings. The scene shifts to a smoky ancestral hall in ancient China, where you stand beside a diviner heating a turtle shell over glowing embers. Ancestral hall, ancient China, night thick with incense and the dull glow of embers. You stand at the edge of a small circle, watching the diviner cradle a turtle shell above the coals. Each breath you take is heavy with smoke and ancient anticipation. The room is lined with carved pillars and painted ancestors, their eyes gazing down as if waiting for a message to pass through you. The diviner's hands are steady as he inspects the shell, turning it to find the perfect spot. Every movement is deliberate, as if the future depends on the angle of his wrist. A hush settles. You can hear the faint shuffle of sandals on packed earth, the distant clang of a bronze vessel, and the rhythmic pulse of your own heart. The turtle shell, polished and warm, is placed carefully above the embers. The fire pops, and the heat licks at your face. You watch as fine cracks begin to snake across the shell's surface. This, you realize, is not just about seeing the future. It is about making sense of the present, about anchoring the unknown in something solid. Beside you, a scribe kneels with a slender knife, He leans in, squinting in the flickering light, and begins to carve marks along the shell's edge. The sound is soft but precise, a series of tiny scrapes, each one deliberate. These are not random scratches. The scribe is inscribing the earliest Chinese characters, capturing the diviner's questions and the answers the spirits might reveal. In this smoky hall, writing is more than a record. It is a bridge between worlds, both a message and a map. You glance at the marks, straight lines, angled slashes, curves that seem to echo the cracks themselves. Unlike the wedge-shaped cuneiform from the clay-rich lands of Mesopotamia, or the pictorial hieroglyphs that once adorned Egyptian temple walls, these characters feel like they are born from the act of divination itself. Each symbol is a response to a question, a ripple from the spirit world, and a mark of human wonder. You can almost taste the tension in the air as the elders gather to hear what the shell has revealed. The scribe's knife pauses. He wipes sweat from his brow, then carves a final line. The diviner nods, satisfied. The message is complete. This scene, you sense, is not rare in Bronze Age China. Across the land, in village halls and royal courts, similar rituals unfold night after night. The invention of writing here is inseparable from the urgent need to understand fate, to remember what was asked and what was answered, and to weave a thread through the chaos of seasons and dynasties. Now, step back for a moment. Imagine if every text message you ever sent required a fire, a turtle shell, and a scribe with a steady hand. The next time you grumble about autocorrect, remember these early scribes. Their job was not just to write, but to channel the will of the ancestors with every mark. In a sense, they were the first group chat moderators. Only their group included spirits and kings alike. A low breeze stirs the incense smoke, curling it into new patterns. You notice the other scribes in the hall. They are younger, watching every move, eager to learn the craft. There is no alphabet here yet, no universal code. Each set of cracks and characters is unique to the moment. This is writing as ritual, intimate, and unrepeatable. It is also writing as power. Only a few are trained to read these characters, and so knowledge itself becomes a rare and precious thing. In this world, writing can decide who becomes a leader, who gets remembered, and who simply fades into the mist. The Chinese sage Kang Ji is sometimes credited with bringing writing to humanity. Whether he was a real person or a legendary figure, the story matters. It tells you that writing was seen as a gift from beyond, something almost too powerful for ordinary mortals. Pause here. The consequence is that writing's origins in China are forever tangled with ideas of magic, ritual, and cosmic order. When you write, even now, you echo that ancient belief that marks on a page can shape the world. The hall grows quieter. The diviner rises, holding the shell aloft, and the elders bow their heads. The scribe's carved question, "Will the harvest be good? Will the king's son recover?" is now immortalized on the shell. 1,000 years from now, someone might dig up this very piece, run their fingers along the grooves, and wonder about the people who made it. The room's atmosphere is thick with the scent of burnt resin and the weight of tradition. You hear the scrape of the stylus, the shuffle of robes, and the soft, steady breathing of those gathered. The marks on the shell are not just records, they are portals. They connect the living to the dead, the present to the future, and the mundane to the mysterious. Across the ancient world, early scripts blossomed in different soils. In Mesopotamia, scribes pressed reeds into damp clay to create cuneiform. In the Nile Valley, artisans painted and carved hieroglyphs onto cool limestone. Here, in China, writing begins with bone and shell, with heat and hope, and the stubborn desire to ask questions the universe may never fully answer. Consider this. In each civilization, the first uses of writing are as different as the landscapes themselves. In Egypt, writing records the deeds of pharaohs and the prayers of priests. In Mesopotamia, it tracks the flow of barley and silver. In China, writing is a tool for talking to ancestors, a device for decoding the will of heaven. You take a slow breath. The air is thick but comforting, filled with the low hum of voices and the distant clatter of bronze. There is a sense that something big is happening, that the world is changing in ways no one can quite see. The invention of writing is not just about keeping lists. It is about storing memory, transmitting power, and making sure that the questions you ask and the answers you receive are never truly lost. A scribe nearby glances at you, a crooked smile on his lips. He mutters something about how, in the old days, one only needed to remember what the chief told you. Now, you need to remember what the spirit said to the chief, and what the chief said to his cousin, and what the cousin wrote on the shell. The whole thing is getting complicated, he jokes. You chuckle, realizing that bureaucratic headaches are as old as civilization itself. The night deepens. The embers burn low, casting a warm orange light over the carved characters. You sense a pattern. As societies grow more complex, their writing grows more layered, more essential. It is no longer just a tool for priests and kings. It becomes the backbone of law, commerce, and identity. The world outside these walls, the rivers, the markets, the distant fields, is slowly being drawn into the orbit of written words. A compass line. Writing has shifted from sacred ritual to the machinery of everyday life. Outside, the first hint of dawn glows behind the tiled roof. The diviner and scribe begin to tidy their tools. The last of the incense curls upward, lost in the cool morning air. You step outside, feeling the smoothness of the carved shell in your hand, the echo of ancient questions still lingering in your mind. You are left with the sense that every written word, whether scratched on a turtle shell, pressed into clay, or typed into a glowing screen, carries the weight of those first attempts to reach across time. The invention of writing, in all its forms, has changed what it means to remember, to rule, and to belong. As you walk into the growing light, the city stirs awake. The streets fill with the sounds of wooden carts, the calls of vendors, and the laughter of children, learning the characters that will one day carry their own questions far into the future. The air is crisp, alive with possibility. You turn a corner, still holding the shell, and for a moment the city falls away. You are surrounded by towering trees and thick vines, the air damp and buzzing with life. A scribe nearby leans over a stone stela, his hands moving in practiced rhythms to etch out a new kind of script, one that speaks to gods and kings in a land far from China. The story of writing, it seems, has only just begun. Yakshilan, late classic period. In the warm shade beneath towering ceiba trees, you kneel beside a Maya scribe. The limestone stela before you rises from the plaza like a silent storyteller, its face crowded with glyphs that shimmer faintly in the shifting green light. The scribe, a careful artisan with ochre-stained fingertips, draws his chisel along the stone. Each tap is deliberate, rhythmic, and you can feel the vibration humming up through your knees as chips of rock fall away. Beyond the stela, the muted thump of a ball game drifts across the plaza, punctuated by bursts of laughter. The city is alive with ceremony and commerce, but here you are drawn into the stillness of creation. The glyphs are mesmerizing. Each one curls and bends in ways that feel both mathematical and mischievous. Unlike the orderly lines of cuneiform you glimpsed in Mesopotamia, or the pictorial grace of Egyptian hieroglyphs, these Maya signs seem to dance. Some resemble animal faces, others twist into hands or serpentine shapes. With every mark, a scribe records a king's name, a date, a mythic deed, a living bridge between ruler and ancestor, between the present and the gods themselves. For the Maya, writing is never just a tool. It is a sacred act, a way to give memory form and grant events immortality. You watch as the scribe dips a finger into a bowl of black pigment, then leans over a folded bark paper codex. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and crushed leaves. In this moment, writing is not only carved in stone, but painted with care. You notice the scribe's posture, straight-backed, reverent, as if each glyph is a whispered offering. The codex will travel far, perhaps to another city or into a royal tomb. Either way, the story will not fade as quickly as words spoken aloud. Nearby, a group of young apprentices gathers, their voices low. They practice tracing glyphs in soft clay, the stylus leaving grooves that catch the light. The teacher, an older scribe with a wry smile, offers gentle correction. If you squint, you can almost see the echoes of Sumerian Eduba, those tablet houses where future scribes learn their craft on the banks of the Euphrates. Here, too, knowledge must be shaped and shared, one careful mark at a time. A sudden breeze stirs the palm fronds overhead. You hear the distant call of a quetzal, its cry slicing through the midday haze. The Maya believed that Itzamna, their wise deity, first brought writing into the world, a gift that transformed the ordinary into the eternal. In the flicker of torchlight during long temple nights, scribes would invoke Itzamna's name, seeking favor as they pressed stylus to stone. It is easy to forget, surrounded by today's instant messages and blinking notifications, just how much labor went into each word centuries ago. The Maya scribe's stylus is no ballpoint pen. It is a sharpened bone or reed, moistened with ink ground from charcoal and sap. The sensation of the stylus scraping across limestone is like the slow unfolding of a secret. Every glyph requires memory, muscle, and intention. The stone cools under your fingertips, and you realize this act is as physical as it is intellectual. Pause a moment. Listen. The city's heartbeat is the soft percussion of hammers and voices, the rustle of textiles, the sharp clack of ball-game rubber. Yet, in the archive's quiet, the scratch of stylus on stone becomes its own music, a melody of preservation, Each civilization you have visited has invented its own way to record memory. The Sumerians pressed wedges into clay. The Egyptians painted papyrus scrolls in vibrant color. The Chinese shaped brushstrokes as fine as silk. And here, in the Maya lowlands, writing becomes a performance, a display of royal power and cosmic order. Not every use for writing is grand, of course. The scribe's apprentice glances up from his clay and sighs. He is copying a long list of maize deliveries, each entry as vital to the city's survival as any myth. The king's court demands tribute and taxes, and someone must keep the numbers straight. You think of the first accountants in Uruk tallying sheep and jars of oil, and you realize that the business of civilization is built on the backs of busy scribes. Just as you grow used to this rhythm, the scribe leans in and whispers a joke. At least stone doesn't burn as easily as bark paper. His eyes twinkle. It is a gentle reminder that every medium has its quirks. Codices are light and portable but fragile. Stone lasts forever, but is heavy, stubborn, and impossible to edit. You imagine trying to revise an email carved into a boulder and cannot help but smile. This is how writing shapes the world. It is not only a record, but an argument with time. When the Maya inscribe a stela, they are not just telling a story. They are claiming a place in the cosmos, ensuring that future eyes, perhaps even yours, will remember them. The memory lingers, cool and steady, beneath your palm. If you listen closely, you can hear echoes of debate. In the great city plazas, elders and priests sometimes grumble about writing's dangers. Will people forget how to remember? One asks, shaking his staff. Another, younger voice replies, "But how else can we speak to the gods after we are gone?" The question floats in the air, unresolved. You realize that this same conversation has played out in temples from Memphis to Nippur, and will, perhaps, never end. A ball soars over the court, landing with a dull thud. Children cheer. The scribe's apprentice glances up, distracted, and smudges a glyph. The teacher sighs and hands him a damp cloth. Even in the age of kings, mistakes happen, and the world carries on. The plaza smells of roasting maize and incense, a reminder that life is more than ledger and legend. Here is what has changed. You understand the stakes. Writing is not merely a technology. It is a force that shapes memory, power, and belonging. Each civilization has found its own way to inscribe the world, and every script, whether wedge-shaped, pictorial, or looping, carries the dreams and anxieties of those who invented it. Somewhere nearby, a royal procession begins. You catch the glint of jade and feathers as dancers weave between the stelae. The scribe sets aside his chisel, stretching hands stiff from hours of work. Briefly, he looks at you and grins. "Remember this," he teases, "if you ever come back as a king." The shadows lengthen across the plaza. The stone stela, freshly etched, seems to glow in the low light. Names, dates, stories, these are now part of the city's living memory. The air is softer, the sounds of the ball game fading into dusk. You step away from the scribe's side, the texture of ancient stone still cool against your fingers, and slip quietly toward the edge of the plaza. Back in a bustling Egyptian court, you overhear a priest debating a philosopher about the dangers of the written word. A sun-drenched courtyard in Memphis, Egypt, around 2500 years before your own time. You find yourself tucked between a row of whitewashed columns, half hidden among the scribes, as voices rise and fall in the warm air. The court is alive with the rustling of linen, the low hum of debate, and the scratchy sound of reed pens tracing curves onto fresh papyrus. Here, the scent of incense drifts from the altar, mingling with the sharper tang of ink and the earthy dust of the courtyard stones. You catch the end of a spirited exchange between a priest draped in crisp linen and a wiry philosopher with ink stains on his fingers. The philosopher, eyes twinkling, declares, "The gods must have had a sense of humor, giving us writing. Now, even a fisherman can argue with a king if only he can find a scribe." The priest counters, "Writing is sacred. Thoth himself gave us the signs. But beware. King Thammus once warned, if we depend too much on these marks, we might forget how to remember." You step closer, drawn by the tension between reverence and skepticism. The debate is not just about ink and symbols, but about the very fabric of how knowledge survives. The priest's words hang in the air, echoing the tale of Thoth, the divine ibis-headed scribe who presented writing to the king. According to the story, Thoth beams with pride, but King Thamus, wise and practical, frowns. He insists that writing will breed forgetfulness, making people trust external records instead of the living memory inside their minds. For a moment, the courtyard quiets. Scribes pause, their styluses hovering. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath. The story is not new, but it never fails to stir nerves or to spark a smile. Someone in the shadows snickers, suggesting that King Thamus just wanted to keep his secret safe from nosy neighbors. The priest shrugs and grins. In Egypt, even the gods could be the butt of a joke. Here, in the heart of the ancient world, you discover that every civilization has its own version of this dance between awe and anxiety. In Sumeria, the goddess Nisaba is praised for teaching humans to shape cuneiform on clay. In China, legends speak of Kangjia, whose 4 eyes could see the tracks of birds and beasts, inspiring the first written characters. The Maya tell of Itzamna, a deity who handed down glyphs as gifts. The idea that writing is a divine invention is nearly universal, yet the suspicion remains. Some worry that writing could unravel the delicate threads of oral tradition. Others fear that written records might fall into the wrong hands, or worse, that they might outlive their context and be misread by future generations. You hear whispers about a scribe who got in trouble for copying royal secrets, and a merchant who invented a new symbol just to confuse his rivals. The practical problems of bureaucracy breed both innovation and mischief. You glance down at a scribe's hands as he rolls a fresh papyrus scroll. The fibers are rough beneath his fingers. The reed pen flexes, leaving a crisp black trail. The process is strangely hypnotic. Dip, scratch, lift. The texture of the papyrus, the faint swish of the pen, the distant thud of sandals on stone. These are the sounds and sensations of a civilization learning to remember itself. A gentle breeze stirs the scrolls piled on a low table. You notice that, for all the talk of memory and divine gifts, the real business of writing is often far more practical. Ledgers record harvests and taxes. Letters relay gossip and royal decrees. temple archives swell with inventories of barley, oil, and linen. The scribes, with their ink-stained sleeves, are the silent power brokers of the court. Writing, you realize, is as much about managing people and grain as it is about communing with the gods. You pause, feeling the weight of this realization. The invention of writing is not just a story of creative genius or divine inspiration. It is a tool for administration, control, and survival. In a world where empires stretch across deserts and rivers flood unpredictably, kings need to know who owes what, who rules where, and how much grain is left in storage. Words etched in stone or inked onto papyrus become the backbone of power. Suddenly, a loud clatter interrupts the debate. A young scribe, eager but clumsy, has dropped a basket of clay tablets. The tablets tumble across the flagstones, each one stamped with neat wedge-shaped marks. The philosopher bursts out laughing. See? Even the gods can't protect us from butterfingers. The priest, shaking his head, gathers the tablets, muttering about the patience of Thoth. This noisy moment shifts the mood. The scholars begin to reminisce about the earliest days of writing. Someone recalls the first time a Sumerian trader pressed a reed into clay, just to keep track of goats and jars of beer. The marks were simple at first, pictures of animals, baskets, and numbers. But over centuries, these marks grew abstract. Cuneiform, the script of Sumer, evolved into a system of symbols for words and syllables, able to capture the complexity of language itself. The consequence is clear. Writing changes what can be remembered, and who can do the remembering. You lean in, the ambient noise of the city swelling behind you. From the river, you hear the distant calls of traders and the rhythmic slap of oars. In the nearby market, a woman haggles over fish, her voice rising above the din. The city is alive, every corner humming with stories and secrets. Yet here, in this courtly bubble, a handful of scribes are quietly shaping the future. The philosopher, now warming to the crowd, jokes that in a few thousand years people might invent machines to remember everything for them. The priest laughs, insisting that no machine could ever rival the wisdom of a well-trained Egyptian memory. You catch the glint of humor in both their eyes. The debate, you realize, is as much about identity as it is about technology. The conversation shifts again, this time to the question of origins. A scribe points to a battered tablet, its surface covered in tight rows of wedge marks. This, he says, is the ancestor of every letter you'll ever read. Scholars generally agree that true writing first appeared in Sumer around 3200 to 30,000 years before your own era. Egypt followed soon after, each civilization inventing its own script, each believing their signs were the first and finest. You notice the pride in the scribe's voice. It is not just about who wrote first, but about how each people sees themselves reflected in their script. Hieroglyphs, with their elegant curves and animal shapes, embody Egyptian grandeur. Cuneiform, with its sharp angles, speaks of Sumerian ingenuity. In both cases, the scripts become more than tools. They become symbols of identity and legacy. A hush falls as the priest lifts a papyrus and begins to read a myth aloud. The story weaves gods and kings, wise animals and clever scribes. You listen, lulled by the cadence of ancient words. But even as the tale unfolds, you sense the underlying tension, the promise and peril of preserving knowledge outside the mind. The consequence is that every new advance in writing brings fresh debates and fresh jokes. The philosopher winks at you, whispering that in the future people might argue about the dangers of reading too much at night. You smile, reminded that the questions swirling in this Egyptian court are not so different from those in your own world. How much should you trust the written word? What do you risk by letting memory slip away? You listen as the debate drifts into laughter and song, the court settling into an easy rhythm. The scribe beside you offers a scrap of papyrus. The fibers are cool and slightly rough. You trace the faint outline of a bird, the sign for the letter A. In this quiet moment, you feel the weight and wonder of writing, not just as a tool, but as a living bridge between memory and forgetting. In the fading light, you step through the colonnade, the sounds of the city beckoning. You carry with you the echo of the debate, the laughter of scribes, and the scratch of stylus against stone. The world outside is waiting, its stories etched in clay and papyrus, its secrets hidden in the swirl of ancient script. You stand before the stele of the vultures, its carved scenes telling of ancient battles. Lagash, southern Mesopotamia, midday heat. You stand before the stele of the vultures, sunlight glinting across its carved limestone. The scenes are alive with motion. Soldiers press forward, vultures wheel overhead, and the king stands triumphant, his story etched for anyone who cares to read. Around you, the city hums. The air is busy with the bleating of goats, the distant clang of copper tools, and the constant, rhythmic scratch of stylus on stone tablets. You can almost feel the pulse of this ancient world beneath your feet. A scribe nearby, robe dusted with chalk, leans over a clay tablet. His reed stylus moves with practiced confidence, tracing wedge-shaped marks as if he were jotting down a shopping list for a particularly demanding neighbor. But this isn't just groceries. He records the name of a soldier, the measure of barley owed, the tally of sheep returned from pasture. Every mark fixes a fact in time and space, transforming fleeting words into something permanent, something that could outlast a lifetime or even an empire. The everyday details that might otherwise evaporate in the heat are now pressed forever into clay. Before writing, people tried all sorts of creative tricks to remember things. You might have tied a knot in a string to recall a debt, or used a handful of tokens to stand for a flock of goats. These systems were clever, but the message only lasted as long as the memory of the person who made it. If your neighbor miscounted, or the string was lost, well, good luck convincing anyone you were owed 2 more jars of oil. Writing, by contrast, is a stubborn thing. It will not forget, and it does not care if you change your mind. Here, in Lagash, writing is everywhere. Not just in the grand monuments, but in the humdrum rhythm of city life. You pass a scribe recording a marriage contract under the shade of a fig tree. Another sits in the temple archive, tallying daily bread rations, his stylus tapping out the future of 100 laborers. These scribes are the memory keepers of civilization, transforming the chaotic flow of life into neat rows of cuneiform script. Their work is slow and deliberate, the stylus cutting into clay with the faint, satisfying crunch of a cracker underfoot. Around you, the scent of baked bread mingles with the earthy tang of damp clay. Even the air seems to carry the weight of stories waiting to be told. The stele of the vultures itself is a kind of miracle. It does not just list who won or lost. Instead, it tells a story, one of the earliest historical narratives we possess. You see the king of Lagash, Ianatum, leading his soldiers to victory, his deeds preserved not just in song, but in stone. The images are bold, almost theatrical. You realize that for the first time, history is not just a rumor. It is a record, carved so deeply that even the wind cannot erase it. The city's scribes are not born, they are made. You follow a group of boys, reed styluses tucked behind their ears, as they shuffle into a low mud brick building at the edge of the temple quarter. This is the Ajuba, the tablet house, where Sumerian children learn the art of writing. The atmosphere inside is thick with concentration. A master scribe stalks between rows, correcting posture, adjusting grip, and occasionally swatting away a wayward fly. Each student practices their marks on a lump of clay, the surface still cool from the river. Their first attempts look like the work of someone trying to draw with a mitten. But with patience, those awkward scratches become the elegant script that will one day decide the fate of taxes, treaties, and tales. The archive is the city's real treasure. Hidden behind heavy doors, thousands of tablets line the shelves. Each one is a whisper from the past. You run your fingers along the cool clay, feeling the ridges where a scribe pressed a name or a number centuries ago. Some tablets track labor assignments, a worker sent to harvest reeds, another to repair a canal. Others record tax collections in such detail that even the local goose herder could not escape notice. You can sense the quiet pride of the scribes who made these records. For them, writing is power. It is the ability to make a promise, a debt, or a declaration stick. But here's a twist. The oldest texts we have might not be the first texts ever written. Clay and stone last, but not everything does. There could have been notes scrawled on wood or bark, messages lost to time, or even an entire system of symbols swept away in a flood. The written record is impressive, but it is also patchy, a bit like trying to reconstruct a whole novel from just a handful of surviving pages. That is the secret vulnerability of history's memory. You pause for a breather. The air inside the archive is cool and faintly sweet, carrying the scent of old earth and burnt incense. The silence is broken only by the gentle shuffling of clay tablets as another scribe adds to the collection. Every new record is a thread in the tapestry of the city, woven tightly enough to survive even when voices fade. Step outside, and you catch the city's rhythm again. The mud brick alleys are alive with bargaining, laughter, and the distant clang of temple bells. Above it all, the memory of the stele of the vultures lingers, a reminder that stories, once carved, can echo for millennia. The invention of writing has changed everything. Power now belongs not just to those with swords, but to those with styluses. Knowledge does not vanish with the setting sun. It sits quietly on a shelf, waiting for a new reader. You sense the world shifting. The city is no longer just a place to live. It is an organism with a memory, a society that can look back and remember what it once was. Words and ideas are fixed in time and space, and for the first time, the past is something you can visit, not just imagine. Somewhere, a scribe finishes his work, smooths the clay, and sets the tablet out in the sun to dry. He glances up at you, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Perhaps he knows that, thousands of years from now, someone will be standing here, reading the lines he pressed into the wet clay. That is the immortality of writing, the echo of a voice, captured and carried forward long after the city's walls have crumbled. As you turn away from the stele, the texture of the clay still cool on your fingertips, you realize that what began as a simple act, a scratch, a mark, has become the foundation of civilization's memory. The city breathes, the archives swell, and the sun climbs higher. You walk on, the steady beat of ancient life following in your footsteps, carrying the stories that will outlast even stone. A quiet morning, modern city, present day. You sit at your desk, light from a window spilling across your keyboard, the hum of traffic outside. The stylus and chisel are gone, replaced by the smooth glide of your fingers across keys, or the scratch of your favorite pen. Yet, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echoes of those ancient scribes, their careful marks pressed into clay, the crisp sound of a reed pen gliding across papyrus, the soft shuffle of sandals on a stone floor. You are living in the world they dreamed into being, even if you rarely think of it that way. Once, the act of writing was reserved for a chosen few, those who spent years hunched over in dimly lit temple archives, learning the secrets of cuneiform or hieroglyphs. The air in those places was thick with the smell of damp clay, the bite of ink, and the ever-present dust. Each mark was a careful negotiation between memory and permanence. Every new record was a small victory against the slow slide of forgetting. You might imagine those early scribes as serious, even somber. But picture this, a young apprentice in the scribal school of Memphis, Egypt, nervously practicing his first hieroglyphs. His reed pen leaves a wobbly owl and a squashed-looking sun. His teacher, arms crossed, sighs, then cracks a rare smile. Mistakes, after all, are part of every new language, whether it is ancient Egyptian or the first time you tried to text with predictive spelling. The pattern is familiar: trial, error, and a slowly growing confidence. As you type or write, you are taking part in a story that began with the humblest of needs. Ancient villagers, as their communities swelled into towns and then cities, found themselves overwhelmed. Barley, cattle, pottery, and labor all needed tracking. In Mesopotamia, someone pressed a wedge-shaped stylus into wet clay, inventing a new way to count and account. In Egypt, scribes painted symbols on reed scrolls, recording the bounty of the Nile. The first words were not poems or prayers, but lists and ledgers, receipts and rations. The world's oldest writing was the ancient equivalent of a spreadsheet, dry, practical, indispensable. It is tempting to think the first preserved texts must have been the first ever written, but that is unlikely. Writing, like every invention, had many awkward beginnings that faded without a trace. The clay tablets and papyrus rolls that survive today are only the lucky ones, spared by accident or intention. What you see in museums is a glimpse, not the whole story. Pause for a moment. Run your fingers over the surface of your desk. Imagine the texture of a clay tablet, cool and slightly gritty, the shallow grooves of cuneiform under your thumb. Or picture a papyrus scroll, the faint rustle of reeds as you unroll it, the scent of old plant fibers rising in the air. It is not so different from the tactile pleasure of turning a page in a favorite book, or feeling the ridges on your phone case. In every era, the tools change, but the need to touch, to hold, to make your mark remains. Now, consider the stakes. The invention of writing is often counted among the greatest leaps in human history. Before it, stories and knowledge lived in the fragile network of memory. Afterward, ideas could outlast their creators. Writing did not just help humans remember their debts or their harvests. It made possible the entire scaffolding of law, science, and literature. It offered a way to store dreams and warnings for generations yet unborn. Every time you jot a note or send a message, you are drawing on a power that once seemed almost magical. Of course, not everyone welcomed this magic with open arms. Even in the earliest days, some wondered whether writing might weaken memory or make people too reliant on ink and clay. In Egypt, there were debates about whether a written spell was as potent as one spoken aloud. Philosophers in later eras would fret that writing could make minds lazy, slipping into forgetfulness. These debates echo today, as you wonder if autocorrect is making your spelling worse, or if constant notifications chip away at your focus. You might smile at the thought of an ancient Egyptian scribe grumbling about the youth these days, relying too much on their newfangled papyrus. Perhaps that same scribe would feel right at home in a modern office, muttering about email overload and the lost art of penmanship. Some things, it seems, never change. The tools evolve, but the human mind, restless, inventive, occasionally forgetful, remains much the same. Let this scene widen around you, a city in the Bronze Age, the sun rising over stone walls, the air alive with the calls of merchants, and the distant rhythm of hammers. In a quiet corner, a scribe sits, stylus poised, surrounded by the murmur of voices and the steady thrum of daily life. You are there, in spirit, whenever you reach for a notebook or click send. The legacy of those first scribes is woven into every message, every contract, every story you share. Here is a gentle twist to carry with you. The earliest writing, born from the need to count and control, has become the means by which you express your wildest hopes and deepest regrets. The scratch of stylus and the tap of keys are both declarations. I was here. I saw. I remembered. The consequence is simple to state. Every word you write today is a thread in an ancient tapestry, connecting you to people who lived and dreamed thousands of years ago. All early civilizations, from the bustling ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the temple-lined avenues of Egypt, recognized the quiet power of the written word. Writing was not just a tool, but a force, a way to shape memory, command obedience, and summon the wisdom of the past. It was a passport to immortality, a shield against the eroding winds of time. You may never hold a clay tablet or pen a scroll by candlelight, but you carry their spirit every time you write. The next time you jot a grocery list, type an email, or scribble a note to yourself, remember this: You are the heir to a tradition that built empires and preserved dreams. The invention of writing did not just transform how ancient people lived. It still shapes how you think, connect, and imagine what comes next. If, by now, your eyes have grown heavy and the world is softening into a gentle blur, let the echoes of reed pens and chisels lull you further. May your dreams tonight be filled with the soft scratch of history and the quiet satisfaction of knowing you belong to an unbroken chain of storytellers. In the end, that is the true legacy of writing. Not just marks on clay or paper, but the enduring human desire to reach across time and whisper, "I remember." The story, for now, is complete.